I worry that there may be another conflict that could be in the preparation stage in our own hemisphere here in the United States, and that is down regarding Venezuela. Now, of course, there's been a lot of issues. The United States has been, in my view, completely blowing through any kind of rule of law that existed and having lethal military operations against alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and Pacific Oceans, just unilaterally just executing people because of being accused of something. Who knows if they were actually guilty or not? Just trust me, we have perfect intelligence, which of course we never have. But that's what we're saying here. Now, all of a sudden, we have 15% of the United States Navy arrayed in a basically a strike package against Venezuela. And we've been waiting for some time that they've been in position and could have done something, but so far nothing has. Well, yesterday at Mar-a-Lago, one of the reporters asked President Trump, by the way, is regime change your operation, your objective here? Where are we going with this?
Well, I think it probably would. I can't tell that. That's up to him, what he wants to do. I think it would be smart for him to do that. But again, we're going to find out. Look, Venezuela did terrible things to the United States. They sent hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people into our open border. They sent their criminals. They sent their prisoners. They sent their drug dealers. They sent their mentally insane and incompetent people into our country more than any other country. Others did too. The Congo did. Others did too. And we just let them come right in because we were run by a stupid president. But you don't have a stupid president anymore.
Yeah, worried a little bit about his confidence in himself there. But let's look at some of the fundamentals that he said. First of all, is there any international justification to overthrow a regime because you allege that millions of people from that country have come across your borders?
First of all, Donald Trump has a selective memory, okay? The mass migration policy from Venezuela, that green light started under, guess who? Donald Trump in his first term. And of course, that policy was then taken with extra vigor under Joe Biden. Why? Because the U.S. saw that it's the same reason they took refugees from Syria during the Europe and the United States and Canada, all the NATO countries. Because if you showed up at the border and you claimed political asylum and you said, I'm fleeing the Assad regime, automatic, straight through, case settled, you're in, and with tons of benefits. Exactly the same policy the United States with people coming from Venezuela. We're fleeing Maduro. Automatic asylum. Done. So, and what Joe Biden did was formalize it. Go look it up. Up to, I don't know, probably well over 300,000 Venezuelans to be, with a wave of a magic wand of the U.S. government, given fast track settlement on their, status in the United States. Venezuelans and this is on the condition. There's a political condition attached to this, because this is a strategy that the United States, that European countries have employed for decades, which is they create instability in a country like Syria, in a country like Libya. And prior to the collapse of that country, they'll absorb. They did the same with Iraq. They do it with Iran with the collapse of the Shah. They take in what will be the future fifth column. Canada does this as well. There'll be the future fifth column, which will be used to mobilize and create the main tip of the spear for the international effort for future regime change. This is a post-colonial strategy. This is a neo-colonial strategy. And you combine that with the NGO soft and smart power that's deployed through the Open Society and so forth. There's just and even Amnesty International to some degree is also involved in some of this, specifically with Syria, also Afghanistan. So it becomes the cause du jour in the future. And so Donald Trump opened the door for this policy during his first term. And now he's turning around saying, oh, Biden let in 1 million people. No, Maduro's flooding our country with immigrants over the border. This is a total lie. Millions of Venezuelans have not come over the southern border. in the last bunch of years. These people are coming from other countries. But those who are coming know that they are going to get fast-track process, at least under Trump 1 and Biden, as long as they're anti-Maduro. This is a policy. And the Democrats get the added value of future registered Democrats from those immigrants. And there's also a political motivation there, which I think we should all be honest about. That's also a byproduct, convenient byproduct, partisan byproduct of this type of engineered immigration. But it is geopolitical. It is geopolitical. Make no mistake about it. Same in Europe. This is a long-standing policy.
Now, the reason why I brought the whole topic up and relates to trust is because we have always bragged about, maybe never really applied all the way, but periodically we did pretty good, this whole international rules-based order, right? That we have since World War II, the last 80 years. That's what's, provided security and stability. And for a lot of the period of time, it did, genuinely so. But now then you see with this whole thing we just discussed with the Russia-Ukraine war that the norms have kind of gone out the window, and we aren't even trying to physically forget the words, trying to bring peace in. And we seem to be setting the stage for more conflict later on. So that's undercutting trust around the world, not just with Russia. But down here, there is the issue of what is the rule of law? Can a powerful country like the United States just use its military power for geopolitical reasons, as you say, that have nothing to do with actual national security, or follow the rule of law? Now, there are some in the United States that are saying, hey, this is not okay. We have the U.S. Constitution. We have the 1973 War Powers Act. They have to be followed. Tim Kaine, senator from Virginia, and Rand Paul from Kentucky have both been articulating, both from the Republican and Democrat side, have been saying this for a while, that we need to follow the rule of law and the Constitution. But there are others that say, yeah, you know what? Not so much. In fact, we're going to show you a couple of retired generals who want to say that's really not a big issue. First of all is Jack Keane, who says, look, we've been breaking the law for a long time. Why worry about it now?
First of all, sanctions and other means just haven't flat worked. They didn't work during the Biden administration, and President Trump came back and recognized that none of this has worked. Previous presidents have had to deal with the same thing, narco trafficking, fraudulent elections. In '89, President H.W. Bush did a physical takeover of the regime in Panama just for that reason, a narco trafficker, a human trafficker, and a fraudulent election. And President Clinton did much the same in '94 in Haiti, when a dictator deposed a democratically elected president, and President Clinton wanted that president returned to power. There's precedent for this. Congress was consulted, but neither one of those presidents, a Democrat or a Republican, sought approval from the Congress. The Congress is being consulted about this. They may disagree with it, and they have a right to do that. But I don't believe the administration is going to seek their approval.
So according to Brother Keene here, the standard isn't what the Constitution says or the U.S. law, but because, Obama and Clinton and Bush, and because they ignored all these things before, add Biden into that, add Trump in the previous, because they've ignored it before, Congress can say whatever they want, I guess, but really, we don't have to worry about that because we broke the law in the past. What does that tell you about the rule of law, and what does that do to trust around the world in the U.S.?
Back to the question of trust, your original question. All of these agreements, international law, treaties, what they called international norms for years, they're all based on trust, especially amongst allies. This is the big break from the past. Normally, the United States would demand international law of its adversaries, and of course, it would never follow it itself, and it would like a waiver. And if the ICC dared, indict any of our officials under the Bush administration, they passed the Hague Invasion Act, threatening to invade the Hague if they indict any of us, not just ours, but our allies. Okay, so clearly there's always been a double standard with regards to international law. The difference is today in 2025, this administration is actively threatening its allies with secondary sanctions, and I would put punitive tariff threats under the banner of secondary sanctions because he is using them clearly as a punishment tool. and also threats to take territory, which the United States has also done. People should not forget about that. And Trump has also revived this talking point in recent weeks about expanding the United States land holdings, for instance. So these are things that are going to affect U.S. allies. That's a big difference. So now you will have a complete breakdown of the international system, and this is a system that most of the world relies on for order. Even though the United States can discard it whenever it wants, can apply it selectively, the rest of the world, the irony of this Hobbesian state of nature in the realist world, which John Mearsheimer and others articulate, and that's the paradox of realism, is the countries at the top can demand international law and people to abide by it and conform to it, and everybody, even though they don't have to ever abide by it, the U.S. or its close allies like Britain, but the rest of the world, including Russia and China, must use international law in order to protect themselves and to band together with countries that they're allied with and trading with, because that's all they have. When you have total anarchy in the international system, and you have other second and third tier powers that are not no longer respecting international law and norms, then we have huge problems, and that could happen in a kind of world war situation. So everything the United States is doing is in some ways mirroring a lot of the conditions that led to World War II, for instance. Just what is being done to Venezuela, what's being done to Russia, and what was done to Japan prior to December 7th, 1941. So and that we can take those lessons from history and we can learn, but the takeaway here is this, that this is not the world of 1940. This is not the world of 1915. This is a different world. You have emerging Asian powers. You have China as a legitimate, bona fide, potential imperial hegemon, global hegemon, economically, technologically, and ultimately, eventually militarily. You have Russia as a bona fide superpower, a modernized, renewed superpower, thanks to NATO's proxy war in Ukraine, and you have the BRICS network, which is congealing faster than anybody could have imagined as a direct result of U.S. Actions and policy, including what Trump has done. He's done the impossible. He has undone all of the CIA's efforts in the Western Hemisphere to set Venezuela against Colombia and Brazil against Venezuela. He has now created potential belt of solidarity that's going to run right through Latin America, from Mexico down through Central America. This is why the U.S. is putting so much energy in rigging the election in Honduras, because they would like to use that as a hinge in Central America. This is why Trump is backing Nasri Asfoura, the extreme right-wing candidate. And by the way, this is also why Israel is taking a big, keen interest in Latin America, because Israel and the United States are partners in this effort. Because Israel wants to also put right-wing governments in all of these countries, because they want to change the voting at the United Nations level for the recognition of a Palestinian state. And so they're looking at that, not only that, but also the business opportunities and the arms sales opportunities for Israel within Latin America. So the U.S. and Israel has the Isaac Accords. And people don't know about this, hasn't got a lot of media coverage, but this is the Latin American version of the Abraham Accords. They're working with the U.S., the Israeli delegations, teams to try to normalize relations with a lot of these Latin American countries that traditionally have been pro-Palestinian and anti-Zionist. Okay, this is a big thing, the Isaac Accords. No small feat. And there's a lot of, Honduras is another front line on that. And what you're going to see is, in the next year, you're going to see movements made against Nicaragua and also a renewed push against Cuba. So they're hoping for a type of a domino thing in Latin America.
More like
this
a
is no
bulldozer.
different.
Yeah.
Yes, no different from what Henry Kissinger was doing in 1973. You know, this is just a new chapter of the. They scrambled jets to kill Salvador Allende in the presidential palace on September 11th, 1973. Okay. And now people in Latin America are like, hey, you guys have actually not changed in 50 years, America. You're at it again. And we
Well, and in
remember
fact,
what that was like.
let me show you one of the things that's maybe facilitating that, and something we should be alarmed about here in the United States, because otherwise we're just going to be this brigandish power that is not even we completely decoupled from the rule of law. And if we get decoupled from the rule of law, you were talking about this the trust issue on the one hand, but even domestically, when you get decoupled from the rule of law and there's no consequence, baby, that is going to start applying even domestically. Here's how it's applying internationally. So again, we get back to the rule of law. Again, another retired general, this time Wes Clark, was asked, wait a minute, but don't we actually have to have Congress designate something as an act of war? And especially if we're going to seize tankers from Venezuela, that is an act of war. Aren't we in danger of doing that without having gone to Congress? Watch his answer.
I don't think it's a declaration of war. I think it is a means of putting economic pressure on. Now, when you put ground troops in, yeah, you really need to get some authorization from Congress for that, because that's a campaign of indefinite duration once you put ground troops in. But this is a naval action to seize sanctioned ships. As far as we can tell, you're doing it with the Coast Guard resources. We've seized ships before. It's been done, and it's an easy way to put economic pressure on Maduro in Venezuela.
It's an easy way to put pressure on. So we've done it before, so no big deal. Who cares if it's within the rule of law? We can do it, and unless troops are on the ground, we don't have to worry about it. But even then, you can see, we'll figure that part out later. What do you make of this whole mentality that says that it's easy to put pressure on somebody even when there's no legal justification for it?
You have to look at the underlying issue that Wesley Clark and all of the mainstream media will not address. What is the U.S. basis for unilateral sanctions against Venezuela?
Yeah.
What is the basis? What, this is an undemocratic regime? You might not like the election results in Venezuela, but the majority of people in that country lean left and support Nicolas Maduro and the Bolivarian Revolution, period. Now, it might not be ideal for Koch Industries or Cargill or any of these other monopoly, or Chevron or any of these other U.S. oil companies, but that is the way it is. So because of that, the U.S. believes it can, because it has unilateral sanctions that are political sanctions. They're based on politics. These are regime change, incentive sanctions, and that they think that they can then engage in piracy internationally on the high seas because they're issuing unilateral sanctions, and that gives them the right to steal property and assets, to seize ships, to blow up ships, to blow up oil rigs, to blow up offshore oil reserve deposits, floating deposits. I mean, that's where this is going to head with the U.S. And so there's no logic to any of this. There's no justification for it other than just rapacious. I mean, I hate to use the word because I don't want to be called a hard leftist, but it's rapacious imperialism when you strip it down.
Hey,
and
let me ask you,
that's the
we're
message
running
they're
low.
sending. Yeah.
We're running low on time here, and I want to get your comment on something that is very much related to that. I think related directly to what you just said. When asked yesterday by Trump, these oil tankers that we captured, they say, well, they're sanctioned so that we can seize them on the high seas. And they say, what are you going to do with it? Oh, we're going to steal it. We're going to keep the ship. We're going to keep the oil. Is there any international agreement that allows that to the country?
No, it's also setting a bad precedent because another state could turn around and do the same thing and basically say, well, the United States is doing it, set a precedent there. So it's going to destabilize the international legal framework. You've also got the insurance industry. This hits at commerce. You know, this is the thing. The United States justified waging a military attack on Yemen for a period of months, that they were disrupting commerce, international commerce, and breaking international maritime law on the high seas and so forth. The United States is actually doing it. Where Yemen was doing it specifically, and they announced why they were doing it as a deterrent to stop support for Israel, to stop what the Yemeni Ansar Allah in Sana'a said was a ongoing genocide, and they were using the international courts of justice interim designation for that and the ICC indictments as their international justification for using hard power to prevent support for a rogue state, in this case, the state of Israel. Think about that. Yemen went through all of that gymnastics to justify what they did at the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. The United States hasn't done anything. All Trump's done is wave his magic wand and say narco-terrorists, and that's it. And not only that, Trump seized the Venezuelan state oil company's assets during his first term, liquidated it, paid off Juan Guaido and a bunch of other very dodgy opposition figures, and who knows where the rest of it went. And so that's what he's done already in his first term. And so that's how can that be justified under U.S. law? So these things are going to, as you said, Danny, these end up eating away at the domestic legal framework as well. And that's what's happening in Europe right now because of the Russian asset seizures. It's destroying the European legal system and the European framework that provides stability, that makes it a functioning economy and gets foreign direct investment into the continent. That's all being threatened as a result of this foreign policy.
And as we showed yesterday on the show here, it has domestic implications as well in Europe, as Colonel Jacques Beau has been censured and actually sanctioned an individual for the crime, there is no crime, of not agreeing with what they're saying. So if it's not just restricted to what's going on internationally. That's what I say. It's happening there. I mean, who knows how much longer you're going to be safe, or I'm going to be safe, or Glenn Deason. I mean, we're telling the truth, but some people don't like the truth. And how long is it before they start using the rule of law or the power of law against us?
That's the point, Danny. That's the point, is that these start off as being sanctions used internationally. In the case of Europe, it's to damage Russia, to hurt Russia, to punish Russia. But as it's failing to punish Russia, clearly, it's not punished the Russian economy. It's not punishing Russia on the battlefield. And as it fails, the policy remains and then is turned back on their own population to attack their political opponents who are opposing this failed policy. The United States is doing exactly the same thing. I could talk about the attack on free speech regarding Israel that this administration is engaged in, stopping campus protests against the U.S. support for the Israeli genocide. As an example, that is a foreign policy that has come back to basically fester within the domestic political setting, ultimately undermining the U.S. Constitution. I'm talking about freedom of speech and assembly, two basic rights in the United States. So what you're saying here, Danny, is very important, that this isn't just an externalized issue vis-a-vis Venezuela, vis-a-vis Russia, vis-a-vis whatever target country, Iran. These end up basically infecting the domestic political framework, the machinery of democracy at home. They ultimately do, because the policies don't go away. The sanctions don't go away, and these types of punitive, administrative, arbitrary punitive measures. In the U.S., it's all of that power concentrated in the executive branch, from administration to administration, Democrats to Republican to Democrat to Republican. Show me a president that rolls back executive power in the last 30 years. I've not seen it.
Yeah, we just roll back the rule of law, and that is also bipartisan. But listen, we really appreciate you coming on today and sharing this stuff and being completely, I mean, kind of like what this group is. We are all unintimidated and uncompromised to tell the truth, no matter what it is, no matter the cost to even some of our brothers in this industry here. And we're going to keep doing it, and we appreciate you coming on our show to share these truths today.
Thank you, Danny. Merry Christmas.
And a Merry Christmas to you too, and to all of our viewers. And by the way, here in the United States, of course, we're ahead. Well, actually, we're behind on some of the clocks. But tomorrow is New Year's Eve, or Christmas Eve, rather. And in the United States, it's often kind of the unofficial start of the holiday season. But here at the Daniel Davis Deep Dive, there's too many things going on, so we will have shows for you tomorrow. We'll also have almost certainly some kind of information for you, even on Christmas Day, because we don't want you to be without. But we will look forward to sharing Christmas Eve with you tomorrow here on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. You know, I don't try to talk you into buying gold or tell you how to run your stock portfolio, but there is a way you can help us. Subscribe hit that like button and share this with somebody you love.